Okay, should be synchronized. Okay, so I figured I would do another narrated flight, and I'm looking a little silly now, I know, because, you know, I'm getting the hat down and the glasses and everything. It's not always that easy. So, but I think I got myself covered now. Now, I'm gonna fly over this little area here, which is a fairly nice place to do some relaxing FPV flying. It has a big field, so you can, you know, test out stuff. And as far as I know, we're able to stay friends with the farmer who owns the field, so everything is good. So I figured I would just kind of talk about the plane I'm flying and kind of my FPV preparations when using this plane, and also a little bit about this area. So, I mean, if you find this kind of stuff really boring, then I guess you can just maybe put on some music and watch the scenery, because it's actually quite nice. So yeah, this is kind of one of my nicer FPV airplanes. I really enjoy flying FPV with just you know, sticking one of those FPV backpacks on a random old any old airplane and fly it with a 2.4 gigahertz system and just sort of zip around some trees or something, and that can be really fun too. But this is kind of a proper lean mean FPV machine, I guess. So I've set this up with a Vector flight controller from Eagle Tree Systems, and it has a ECUHF long range control system. And you can see this really weird antenna I have here. It's called a Moxon antenna, and it's a directional antenna for the ECUHF system. So basically, if you're flying really far away, you should point your antenna directly at where the plane is. With the kind of distance I'm flying usually, and especially today, it doesn't matter at all. But what's nice about it is, if you have one of those Omni whips sticking out at the front of your transmitter, then you kind of have to hold your transmitter like this for it to be the antenna to be effective. With this setup, the antenna is oriented perfectly the way it is now, with the radio sitting flat. And I know for a lot of people that's kind of a big deal. Yeah, I'm just doing some loops. I'm 80 meters above where I took off, so not very high at all. So I figured I'd just talk a little bit about the plane first, and then I'll climb up and have a look at the hill. I changed out the foam on the faceplate of my goggle yesterday because it was all super chewed up, and it hurt my face because my face was kind of resting directly onto the plastic, or rather the plastic, I guess, was resting on my face, whatever. But I'm not really getting comfortable with it, but I guess, yeah, it's just one of those things you have to get used to, I suppose. Now, since this is kind of a nice FPV plane, I sort of have some checklist preparations that I like to do before I get flying. So one of the first things I always do is I take my Trakimo GPS tracker. It's one of those lost device type trackers, but a proper one using GPS and GSM networks to kind of pinpoint and alert. So I open the app on my phone to see that the tracker is fully charged and to see that it's actually indicating where it's at. And then I check all my batteries. So I use a battery checker to check individually each cell of the flight LiPo. And then I also have a separate battery for the ECUHF transmitter. You can see that sitting kind of resting on top of the transmitter here. And then I use the battery checker to check the LiPo I have in my goggles. And then I always check a spare LiPo for the goggles and a spare LiPo for the EC-UHF, and I stick that in my pocket. So let's say either one dies, the plane can go to return to home, and it will loiter directly above me in a circle. And that will give me time to exchange the batteries and not have to like fumble around in the car or anything. So I guess that gives a little bit extra safety of sorts. And then I connect my camera and make sure I have a memory card. I make sure the battery internal to the actual transmitter I have here is charged. And that battery tends to last forever now, because the way this transmitter is connected to the EC-UHF transmitter is via the trainer port on the back. And when you plug in the trainer port, at least on these radios, you chop the power to the 2.4 gigahertz transmitter that's internal to the transmitter, and that saves a lot of battery, because then I'm just using it as kind of like a glorified mouse and keyboard, I guess. So I'm flying with a Runcam HD, not the HD2 that everyone seems to be buying now. I have one of the original HDs, and I guess it's, in theory at least, it's a lesser camera. But I've been flying with it for a bit this summer, and it's been nice. It's not summer now. It's actually the second to last day of October. So we are definitely in fall, closing on winter time. I can hear a tractor down on the field, and if I quickly take my goggles off, I think I can see it. Yeah, I'm seeing it on the field, so I'll try not to fly over him. I saw him. Yeah, she didn't want to talk to me. Yeah, so anyway, I'm using the Runcam HD as my flight camera, and that seems to be working out just fine for me anyway. This isn't actually, this isn't exactly high-speed, intense flying. Yeah, I'm just flying circles over a field, so whatever latency the camera introduces to my FPV feed is no big deal whatsoever. So I guess I've used up about 60% of this battery, and I've flown for about 10 minutes. So it's not the greatest specs I've seen on flight time, but I've done a lot better in the summertime. I don't know if general convention is that batteries perform not as great when it's cold. So I'll try a kind of a hefty climb, and then I'll sort of tilt down my camera so I'll still keep looking at the ground while I'm climbing, and I'll draw it up to 17 amps is flat out on this 3-cell. It's not, major, but then I'll see the voltage, and it should stay above 10 volts while I do it. So let's have at it. Yeah, so I'm at 18 amps, and I'm doing full throttle and full climb, and with the camera tilted down, I can see the ground just fine and keep track of where I am. Okay, so that's definitely high enough. Camera up, reduce throttle, and let go of the sticks, and it'll level off just fine. Now, this area was actually built this way for the Olympic Games in 1994. I know if you're a young person, that's ages ago. For me, I was a teenager back then, so I remember it really well. Now, you've seen a few clips now of what it looks like in the city down below, and I mean, it's not exactly a big city. There's about 30,000 people living here all around, including the surrounding semi-urban areas, I guess. And it's kind of a big deal that such a small city had, the Olympics. Generally you associate Olympic Games with really big cities, but I think they pulled it off just fine. And I know a lot of people are kind of saying they wish back to those days of having that kind of charm. So the way this plane is set up is I like to stay just above 6 amps because when I'm flying at 6 amps, I know it's stable, it doesn't lose altitude. I've had some stalling issues with this when I've tried to force it to fly too slow, and while using the stabilizer to keep the nose up, and then at some point something has to give. One of the wingtips just dropped like crazy, and it's not a lot of fun, let me tell you. So, but I've discovered that if I stay above 6 amps, I'm all good, even if I'm using the stabilizer. And I figured before I have to land, I'll make one more pass past the ski jumps and kind of explain what everything is. So there you can see kind of the leftovers of the old ski center that was here. We have a much bigger one now in a neighboring city or a little town. And then you can see the twin ski jumps. And then just past that you can see the super steep slope going parallel with the ski jumps. That's what's called the moguls, I believe, in English, which is where they just go down super fast, navigating these crazy bumps. And then past that, it's something really weird that they tried out in the Olympic Games for, I don't know, just for a year or two. And that was actually ski ballet. I mean, it sounds silly, but they would actually play music and go down this slightly steep hill, and they would kind of dance on skis. It was quite something. And nobody does that anymore. That kind of went out of fashion, to say the very least. So I cut my motor now because I got an alarm, 10-volt alarm, which is 3.3 volts per cell. So I wasn't expecting that to happen as quickly, but I guess it could be temperature, it could be I've used this battery a little bit for setup before this flight, so who knows. So I've used 2,319 milliamp hours, and as soon as I cut the gas, everything jumped up to 10.4 volts again, so I'm happy. I still have 100 meters altitude above where I'm at, so I can glide forever on this. And now my amp draw is down to 0.3, so everything is good. Yeah, just to finish off on this ski ballet stuff, that whole sport went out of fashion. So what they use it for now is they have kind of like you can rent these sleighs or I don't know, luges or whatever it's called, and it's good ones. It's not like just sit down on a piece of wood and head out over the top of the hill. It's actually very nice with like skids, and you have a brake with this really pointy thing going down into the ice, and then you have a steering wheel for the front skid, and they pull you up using that ski lift running parallel to the venue. So it's really nice. Like, people can do it for like corporate events and stuff, and you kind of enjoy themselves that way. So yeah, here's a really good shot of it. So on the right hand side you got the ski ballet slope, and then you got the moguls, I believe it's called, and right next to it actually the shorter one is what's called hot dog. I think that's went out of fashion too. That was used for making these crazy backwards flips and whatever. So I'm 8 meters above my own altitude. I think I'm coming in for landing, and I will do it visually. So here's the plane. Yeah, so I think that was a pretty successful flight. I hope I didn't bore you too much with all my yapping, and I hope you enjoyed seeing kind of the scenery around where I live. So I was gonna call it quits right now, but I figured out my hands aren't that frozen, and I still have one more flight battery I can burn, and the light is good, there's no wind. So, and also it was kind of hard actually to narrate and try to speak meaningful about the subjects I was discussing while doing anything more challenging than just going around in circles. So I figured I'll make one more flight and see if I can get a little more footage that's kind of a little more exciting or a little more nice to look at, and then I'll put some music to that, and then I'll finish off my video with that. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.
shotgun.